Why do engineers need to worry about international trade, especially in the age of the internet? When one of our big commodities is software, can't we just put it on the internet and let it go where it will? Hi, this is David Allen Greer for Global Code. Today, we'll consider the issues of global trade and engineering in an episode we're entitling Digital Trade. For one summer in the early 1990s, I served as the backup site for NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which was between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Every night, one of the negotiators would give me a 5.5-inch floppy disk that contained the most recent version of the treaty. At that point, I would return the disk that I had been given the day before. The negotiation was taking place on neutral ground in the meeting rooms of a local hotel. No one in the NAFTA negotiating process had given much thought about how they should protect their work. They had no central file server, no backup service, and of course, no cloud-based storage. Someone on their legal staff felt that they needed to have at least one copy of the current text kept off-site, and that individual concluded that I was the most trustworthy person that they knew, or so I would like to think. Free trade agreements are one of the foundations of the global economy and of modern life, even though at the moment they are controversial. They're controversial, of course, because they are products of negotiations. Few parties are able to leave a negotiation without feeling that someone else at the table got a better deal than they did. Nonetheless, we have them, and we have to abide by them. Surprisingly, though, free trade agreements are also deeply connected to information technology. An early example of this connection is the 1865 International Telegraph Convention, which allowed the telegraph companies of Europe, most of which were owned by state governments, to pass their messages across borders. A second connection comes 80 years later, the same month that the U.S. Army announced that it had created an electronic computing machine, which was called the ENIAC. That month, the victorious powers of the Second World War announced a general agreement on trades and tariffs, which was called GATT. This institution became the starting point for the World Trade Organization, what we now call the WTO. Without computers to collect and process data, the agreements of the GATT would have been difficult to enforce and difficult to expand into the WTO. Without GATT, the computer industry would have expanded into the world economy much more slowly. In 1995, when the GATT became the WTO, it announced a new trade agreement for digital technologies, an agreement we now call the Information Trade Agreement, or ITA. Initially, the ITA was accepted by only 29 countries, who agreed to give each other the lowest possible tariffs on telecommunications and computing equipment. At the moment, there are 81 countries that are signatories to the ITA. In the last year, these signatories have agreed to further reductions to tariffs for computing and information products and services. The first of these cuts has already begun. It began in July of last year. Negotiations, of course, are never complete. Economies change and force countries to reposition their industries. Technologies change and create products that cannot easily fit into old agreements. NAFTA was completed before the rise of the commercial internet. It covers internet services only in a haphazard way. The three parties of NAFTA have been reluctant to update the agreement to include these services. Obviously, once you open negotiations for one sector of an agreement, you can quickly find yourself discussing the terms for the entire agreement. Yet, the internet has become central to every economy on the planet, and NAFTA needs to handle it in a more sophisticated way than it currently does. In thinking about the internet as a trade platform, we need to consider a variety of issues that were viewed as unimportant 2 decades ago, issues that are not covered in NAFTA. These issues include the free flow of data, protecting source code, security and privacy, data localization, digital customs, even e-commerce. The recent discussions on a new trade agreement that was to have been called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, dealt with these issues in a modern and in a fairly effective way. A summary of the digital trade provisions in the TPP can be found at the website of the U.S. Trade Representative, https://ustr.gov. The current administration has withdrawn from the TPP agreements, arguing that it's not in America's interest to pursue them. However, the digital trade provisions could be useful. Digital technology will continue to advance whether we have negotiations or no, and digital trade needs to be guided by clear and current trade agreements. We could probably improve the ITA. We will almost certainly need to bring NAFTA up to date. There's a lot of work to be done, and that work will require the advice and guidance of the engineering community. Of course, when we come to those negotiations, I don't expect to be the backup site, not this time. At least that we can handle in a more sophisticated way. This is David Alan Grier for Global Code. Take care.